When Harry Became Sally is a search for truth in an age of identity. In the span of just a few years, the language of identity has rewritten our culture. Terms that once belonged to medicine or philosophy now shape classrooms, laws, and friendships. But underneath the slogans lies a quieter question. What is the human person? Ryan T. Anderson, a political philosopher from Princeton and Notre Dame, stepped into that storm with a book whose title deliberately echoed a romantic comedy, but whose subject was anything but lighthearted. He wanted to explore what happens when compassion and truth seem to pull in opposite directions. The author's starting point. Anderson writes from a tradition that sees the body and soul as a unity, not a rivalry. Our bodies are not accessories, he insists, they are integral to who we are. For him, modern culture's mantra, "Be true to yourself," has drifted toward an idea that the self can define everything, even biological sex. What he calls transgender ideology, he interprets as a separation of mind from matter, of feelings from form. Yet his tone isn't mocking, it's pleading. He worries that in the rush to affirm, society might forget how to ask questions. Can love and disagreement coexist? Or have we made affirmation the only form of kindness we recognize? The evidence and the uncertainties. Anderson surveys studies on gender dysphoria and notes that many young people who experience it no longer do so in adulthood. He highlights uncertainties in the data surrounding long-term medical outcomes and raises ethical questions about irreversible treatments. Supporters of medical transition read the same evidence differently, pointing to research that shows improved well-being for many adults. The truth, Anderson suggests, is complex and perhaps more psychological than technological. Our feelings, he writes, can be mistaken. The task of medicine is not to make the body conform to the mind, but to help the mind make peace with the body. Is science describing reality or negotiating it? When evidence is uncertain, what guides compassion? Data or principle? Stories of searching. The most haunting sections of When Harry Became Sally are the personal stories. People who transitioned and later detransitioned. People who found other paths to peace. One recalled, "No one ever asked why I hated my body. They only asked how fast they could help me change it." Anderson includes these voices not as proof of universal truth, but as reminders of complexity. He asks whether our systems listen deeply enough before offering solutions. Critics answer that focusing on regret risks stigmatizing those who thrive after transition. Yet, even they admit understanding identity means listening to every story, not only the affirming ones. Do we fear nuance because it slows the moral urgency we crave? Law, freedom, and the shape of debate. Every idea eventually finds its way into policy. Anderson argues that words about identity don't stay in classrooms. They rewrite the rules of medicine, education, and law. He worries about two things: coercion and silence. In his view, the state should protect citizens' freedom to speak truth as they see it, not compel them to repeat a single narrative. He writes, "The law should not force anyone to act as if they share beliefs they reject." To him, freedom of conscience isn't hostility, it's the precondition for genuine compassion. But others answer that refusing to use someone's pronouns or questioning gender identity policies can feel like denying a person's dignity. Maybe both sides fear erasure. One fears being forced to conform, the other fears being erased by doubt. Can a society honor individual identity without outlying disagreement? Or does the modern hunger for safety inevitably narrow the space for debate? The philosophical heart. Beneath the policies and arguments lies a much older question. What is the self? Anderson draws from a philosophical lineage stretching back to Aristotle and Aquinas. He sees the human being not as a ghost in a machine, but as a body-soul unity. To him, consciousness doesn't float above biology, it expresses itself through it. He says, the body reveals the person. That view collides with what philosophers call expressive individualism, the idea that authenticity comes from creating one's own identity, even against nature. For Anderson, this modern creed promises liberation, but risks alienation. If every truth is self-made, what anchors us to one another? Maybe that's why these debates feel so fragile. When the self becomes self-constructed, disagreement sounds like destruction. But if identity is partly discovered, then conversation becomes discovery too. Are we builders of reality or participants in it? And if we are participants, what larger pattern are we part of? The culture of silence. In 2021, Anderson's book vanished from Amazon's digital shelves. The company said the decision followed its policy against content it viewed as hateful. To Anderson, it felt like proof that conversation itself was under threat. Whether one agrees or not, the event became symbolic, an argument about who gets to draw the boundaries of acceptable thought. Critics of the removal saw it as censorship. Others called it corporate discretion. Either way, the question lingered. If a culture erases its uncomfortable voices, what happens to its curiosity? Every society has taboos. Ours once protected faith, now they protect identity. The challenge is the same: how to defend the vulnerable without forbidding inquiry. Are we protecting people or protecting ideas from being tested? Can disagreement coexist with dignity? Closing reflections. When Harry became Sally may not have the final word on gender or truth, but perhaps that wasn't the point. Its deeper challenge is to our age's assumption that feeling defines being. Anderson calls for a reunion between compassion and conviction, between empathy and evidence. He reminds readers that disagreement can be an act of care if it seeks understanding, not victory. "The truth will set you free," he quotes, "but only if you let it." Maybe that's the real question the book leaves us with. In a world where every voice demands affirmation, can we still learn from voices that unsettle us? Can empathy and truth walk together? Or will one always demand the silence of the other?